For Eric J on Sports, I'm Eric J, and this is what I think. Recently on one of the talk shows, during a discussion of most valuable player for the NFL, the belief was that the award has become a quarterback's award because of the rules in the league, which make it easier for quarterbacks and receivers to do what they do, and running is not at a premium and defenses are at a disadvantage. So the NFL MVP award is essentially a quarterback's award, and it's going to be won by a quarterback every single year. But the conversation turned to whether or not Miami Dolphins wide receiver Tyreek Hill could win the award. And the point that was made was the fact that Tyreek Hill, though he's only 7th in the league in targets and 6th in the league in receptions, he leads the league in reception yards after the catch, and yards per game by a significantly wide margin. And he's also leading the league in touchdowns, and he's doing all this for the team with the best record in the AFC. Presumably the best record in the league because the Dolphins and the Eagles and the Chiefs are all 5-1, but if they were ranked based on performance throughout the season, you would say that the Dolphins are the best team in the league, the Eagles second, and probably the Chiefs third. So Tyreek Hill is the top receiver on the top team in football. But does that do enough to make him the most valuable player in the league? And that was an interesting question because the belief is, in fact, that the award is a quarterback's award. But the question is not necessarily, is Tyreek Hill the best receiver in football, or is Tyreek Hill the best player in football, or even if Tyreek Hill is the most valuable player on his own team, because the obvious response to that would be Tyreek Hill couldn't do all these things if Tua Tagovailoa, his quarterback, wasn't throwing the ball to him. But as I said, he's only 7th in the league in targets. But would he be accomplishing these things without his quarterback? But that's actually not the correct question to ask. Now, the correct question to ask is this: would other receivers in the league be able to do what Tyreek Hill is doing in the same situation? Could Ja'Marr Chase or Davante Adams or one of the other top receivers in the league, Cooper Kupp, Amari Cooper, any of these other guys, would they have the same numbers as Tyreek Hill if they were playing for the Dolphins and Tyreek Hill was playing in their space? Would Tyreek Hill have these same numbers in Dallas with Dak Prescott while Cooper Kupp was in Miami? Would Tyreek Hill have these same numbers in Vegas while Davante Adams was playing in Miami? Would Tyreek Hill have the same numbers in New Orleans while Michael Thomas was playing in Miami? Would he have these same numbers in Cincinnati while Ja'Marr Chase was playing in Miami? That question takes me back to the years when Jerry Rice was a perennial MVP candidate. People thought, and rightfully so, that Jerry Rice was the best wide receiver in football. And he was. He still is. He's the best wide receiver to ever play the game. But there was always the question of, would Michael Irvin or Chris Carter or Tim Brown or one of the other top receivers in the league be able to put up the numbers that Jerry Rice put up if they were catching passes from Joe Montana or Steve Young? And would Jerry Rice put up the same numbers if he was catching passes from Rich Gannon, or if he was catching passes from Troy Aikman, or if he was catching passes from Randall Cunningham? It's an interesting question to consider. It's kind of like the nature versus nurture question. Is where Tyreek Hill is making him an MVP candidate, or is Tyreek Hill an MVP candidate because of who he is and how good he is? Was Tyreek Hill an MVP candidate when he was catching passes from Patrick Mahomes? No. And it's because Patrick Mahomes was such an overwhelming talent that he's going to be an MVP candidate every single year as long as he is winning and as long as he is putting up the numbers he puts up. I said in one of these commentaries recently that Patrick Mahomes should be the top paid quarterback, or at least one of the top 3 paid quarterbacks in the NFL, as long as he's in the league and continues to have a winning record. Once he no longer has a winning record, he shouldn't be the top quarterback in the league. But as long as his teams have winning records, he should always be one of the top quarterbacks in the league because he is the best quarterback in the league. Period. And he plays on the best team. His team's not playing the best now, but it's not his fault. It's the defense's fault. But Patrick Mahomes is the top quarterback of the league, and he had Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill left because the Chiefs simply couldn't afford both guys. But Tyreek Hill was still putting up similar numbers with Patrick Mahomes. But people believed it was because of Patrick Mahomes and the offense of Andy Reid. So now, is Tyreek Hill getting those numbers because of Tua and because of the Dolphins' offense? Or is the Dolphins' offense and Tua benefiting from Tyreek Hill? Did Bill Walsh make Jerry Rice? Or did Jerry Rice make Bill Walsh, Joe Montana, and Steve Young? They're all in the Hall of Fame, so it's who's responsible. Were Joe and Steve and Bill responsible for Jerry, or was Jerry responsible for Joe and Steve and Bill? Is Tyreek responsible for Patrick, or is Patrick responsible for Tyreek? Is Tyreek responsible for Tua, or is Tua responsible for Tyreek? It's an interesting thing to ponder, and I don't think there will ever actually be an answer. But as it stands right now, Tyreek Hill is overwhelmingly the best receiver in the league. He doesn't even have the most catches, but by a large margin, he has the most yards per game. If he continues at the pace he's at, he could conceivably get close to 2,000 yards. I'm not saying he's on pace for that because that's a conversation I hate. I hate it when at the beginning of an MLB season, you see a guy hit 2 home runs in one game and then 2 home runs in the second game, and all of a sudden announcers are saying, oh, this guy's on pace to hit 300 home runs. No, he's not. Because he's going to slow down. There's going to be games where he gets no hits. He's not going to hit 2 home runs every game for the entire season. You see a guy get 150 yards in the first game of the year, and now all of a sudden he's on pace for 2,400 yards. He's not. Because that's not going to happen every week. He might sit out a game, and he might just get stuffed by a great defense. But after 6 games, Tyreek Hill is averaging over 100 yards a game. So yes, after a quarter of the season, after a third of the season, he is definitely on pace. If he continues at this pace, and that's the caveat, he's on pace for a 17, 18, maybe 1,900 yard season. He could be a threat to Calvin Johnson's record. But as it stands right now, would that be enough to make Tyreek Hill the most valuable player, or would the award go to Tua? And then you have to consider the other part of it. The Dolphins are right now 5-1. The 72 Dolphins have already popped their champagne because there are no undefeated teams in the NFL. But what happens if Tyreek Hill continues to put up these numbers, but the Dolphins drop about 4 more games and end up 12-5? While the Eagles end up 13-4 or 14-3, and the Chiefs end up 13-4 or 14-3, and maybe one of these other teams go on a 10-12 game winning streak, and they end up 13-4 or 14-3, and now the Dolphins are a 3rd seed or a 4th seed. Is Tyreek Hill still the MVP? That's something to ponder. Would he still be the most valuable player at the end of the season, as he is considered by one of the talking heads a candidate now? That's the real question. That's what we need to think about. And that's why we don't jump to conclusions at the early part of the season. We wait till about halfway or a little after halfway and say, yeah, I think this guy's got a shot at the most valuable player award. I think this guy's got a shot at the defensive player of the year award. I think this guy's got a shot at rookie of the year. That's how we judge it. We wait until the season is almost over, and then we start the conversation. But for right now, it's an interesting conversation to have. Is Tyreek Hill a candidate for the MVP, or will the award go to his quarterback? Something to think about. Remember to like and share this video and subscribe to this channel, and visit the new Eric J. on Sports website, and follow me on Facebook at Eric J. on Sports 1, and on Instagram and Twitter at Eric J. on Sports. And for Eric J. on Sports, I'm Eric J., and this is what I think.